Good evening, good morrow, and good day, and welcome to another campaign diary and Q&A here on Slice and Dice, talking about everything that went down in session 23 of the Many Lands campaign. And in addition to that, going to be sort of taking a moment to reflect on everything as part of this journey so far with us live streaming a D&D game, sort of highlights, lowlights, kind of quite a candid feel to this episode, bit of a reveal. So not just behind the DM screen, but also into the DM's mind. Or if you're going to talk in the first person, or if I'm going to talk in the first person, in my mind, what's been going on over the stream so far. First of all, let's put this guy to one side for a second. We'll get back to him. Before I forget, so big announcement this week was that our merch store finally has gone live. You can see some of the various lovely items we have for sale in the merch store currently. That's on our Twitch page. If you scroll down, if you're not already following us on Twitch and you're watching us on YouTube, please do so, because that's where we find all the goodies that you would otherwise not find. Right now, as you can see, there's 20% off everything in our merch store. All you've got to do is use the code SADNAT20 and get 20% off. That's running up until Christmas Eve, so make sure if you're going to be ordering, get it in soon. There we go, that's my little plug out of the way. So anyway, with everything that happened in episode session 23, this was really the Christmas special, and so I wanted to do, because I've never done it before, do a kind of festive feeling D&D session. And so I had this idea in mind with bringing in my friend here, the Frost Giant, to kind of have a big bad for the players to face. I intentionally wanted to kind of give them something that would be a real challenge, and possibly a lot more of a challenge than perhaps they were ready for. Just as a kind of Christmas surprise, but also to kind of remind the characters that, you know, they've still got a long way to go in terms of their progression and building themselves as characters. They're still fragile to an extent, you know, and they're not as accomplished adventurers as they might think they are. There are bigger threats in the world. So the kind of a little bit of that, a lot of foreshadowing for what's going to be going on later on down the line. Maybe not necessarily with giants, but perhaps, who knows? But also to kind of give the guys just a bit of a big old sort of kick around, if you like, a big old combat encounter for them to kind of show off some of the skills that they've learned. And some of the things that they've acquired in their time. Also, it gives them a massive XP boost at the end, so that's always really useful to get more experience. And I think actually now basically all of the party have leveled up to level 4, so that in that sense it really worked. Before we got into that, we had the group. They were just about to. They'd basically just unveiled that Neris wasn't who she said she was, and after a scuffle which did not go particularly well. For Neris, she was then cornered and restrained, tied up, and revealed that she was in fact a doppelganger. Now this was a moment that Marta and I had been working on for a little while, so we knew this was coming. It was kind of the ticking time bomb that was there, and it was going to see how long it would take the players to realise this, but also I think. In Marta's last episode of this year, she kind of wanted to have that little moment in there as well. And so, in the last 2 sessions she was here, she was acting maybe slightly differently to how Neris normally does, and just kind of giving these subtle hints, and that kind of built up over time, meaning we had this big reveal right at the end of the previous session, pretty much. It was very, very well played by the players, to be fair, by using Zone of Truth and kind of getting to the bottom of where is Neris, what's going on there. And they asked some quite insightful questions as well about, for instance, Neris's aunt and uncle, and that's the main one that springs to mind. Also, where is she now? Of course, one of the limitations with Zone of Truth as a second level spell means that the person who falls under the effect of it is aware that they're under effect of essentially a truth serum, and so can dodge questions or avoid answering questions. They just can't like fragrantly like you know, they can't outright lie. So this made some fun sort of role-playing moments, but also quite a lot of exposition. So now the players know that Nerys has been taken by somebody else who the doppelganger is working for. That apparently the aunt is also not safe and has also been taken. And apparently the uncle is fine. That's what the doppelganger has said. There's a few other little bits in there as well. I don't want to get into the detail too much of it, but basically they did some good detective work and found out what's befallen their comrade. And then they had the idea of, well, basically we can't really deal with this now. We have a deadline, and I'm glad that they did this. I was very worried that they've got this time-sensitive deadline with the whole lycanthrope banquet poisoning potentially, kind of turning all of high society into werewolves. Thing going on that's very time sensitive. They kind of need to crack on with that. So it was really nice that they went, you know what, we're gonna lock the doppelganger away somewhere, and we'll just deal with it later. Because they've also got that with Lady Helene Grenfell as well. There's kind of these things that can be picked up later on. They're not as time sensitive. Now, out of the three, obviously the three sort of plots now. The lycanthrope storyline is certainly the most time sensitive. Then you probably say that the where Nerys is the next one, and then finally would be Lady Helene, because they can't really at this level do much about the fact that she's been turned to stone, as far as they know. So, you know, we can park those ones for now. There was a danger that, again, it was kind of the players wouldn't know exactly what to do. Now, I think that having multiple storylines and multiple plot hooks is absolutely fine. In fact, well, I'm guilty of this myself, giving them too many, which is why I'm now a little bit cautious about throwing extra ones in there. But this one was always kind of churning away in the background, and it's going to happen sometime. And sometimes players do need to make a choice, and it needs to be open. And in this case, they had that choice. They could like sack off this entire lycanthrope storyline. I mean, it would kind of have some ramifications for sure. I wouldn't have exactly planned for it, but they could do that for sure. Because at the end of the day, free will. I don't want to railroad them into things. So if that seems to be more the priority, then that's what they should do. That being said, once they had locked her away in one of Gant Bron's large chests, which he had on top of the carriage, they then decided to take a rest, and it was at this point that they were transported, sort of by magic, sort of by through essence and like a divine power, to another place entirely, which surprisingly was very snowy themed, and that's where they met my friend here, the Frost Giant. And there was no explanation. It was just they're in a place with snow all around. Just all they can see for miles is snow. And out of a blizzard ahead comes the Frost Giant, and immediately Malar tries to reason with it using thaumaturgy, but it falls on deaf ears, so to speak. And the giant begins to attack them. There was some fun. It was a fun kind of boss fight. This one. They didn't realise right up, and I don't think they realised right up until it looked like one of the characters was going to die that perhaps this isn't quite what it seems, and not in the sense of the doppelganger kind of illusion. I know that trickery and illusions seems to have been a theme so far, and maybe it's just me. Maybe I just really like using things and being deceptive. I don't know. Maybe I'm psychoanalyzing myself a bit too much, but in this case, it was that this is a test. That this isn't real. What's happening? It's a real experience, though. So mentally, they're going through it, but it's a test that doesn't have the consequences of death, and there are reasons for that. So we'll get onto that, but it was a really fun boss fight to do. I think on the one hand, a really powerful foe, the likes of which they haven't faced before. And as James pointed out afterwards, as he keeps track of some of the monsters they've come across so far, this was more than double the challenge rating of anything else that they've faced so far. So indeed, it was a big test, and that was deliberate, because there's going to be bigger threats in the future. So part of the test. Got to see if they're ready to face these bigger foes. Now, it was a touch and go fight. I think that had I rolled better for the giant's intelligence, it may have gone south quicker for the players, because he would, for instance, would have continued hitting the players when they were already down and dying, rather than just kind of hitting them, and as soon as they go unconscious, go, yeah, that's fine, move on to the next threat. So had he stuck around, just kind of started hacking into downed foes, maybe a slightly different story, but nonetheless a very close fight. We had some good lair actions as well, which again kind of came up with this one on the fly, but thought it added to the moment and added to the world, and to this fight, playing with levels a bit by having it was actually after the frost giant rolled a natural 1 on an attack roll, so I said, well, okay, his great axe gets buried into the snow beneath, and you can then see how big this axe is by the way that when it's there next to, I think it was Fleeting Look at the time, you're like, that is a big axe. It's as big as you, and half of it is submerged in the snow right now. And then when he pulled it out, I said that's kind of caused cracks, because it wasn't rocks underneath, it was ice, and so the ice gave way, very thick chunks of ice, but it gave way, causing the giant to then collapse into the cold water below. But this then meant that the giant was still, half out of the water, still 10 feet of him visible, because he was over 20 feet tall. So the players still had a job dealing with him at that point. And then with the icy cold water also doing damage when the players were within it, if they failed a con save, sort of added another layer to the battle. And I think that, I think personally this boss battle worked very well. And it ended at the right time. It ended, I think, before it got too samey. There's a danger with big sort of slogging fights that when it goes on for too many rounds, that perhaps it's getting it's dragging out. It feels like it's dragging, and it starts to get a bit cumbersome and a bit tedious. I think this ended before that happened, which is ideally what you want. Now, obviously, as a DM, part of that is down to me, and this frost giant I threw at them was slightly tougher than the regular one. Only slightly though. I just upped its hit points slightly because I realised that they were cutting through it a lot quicker than I had anticipated. And again, this was meant to be a test, so it needed to be a test for the party, and so for that, kind of beefed it up a little bit, just a smidge, just DM's license to do that. As it turned out, only 2 of the players ended up actually getting killed in this fight, and when they were killed, they disappeared. Now, one of them, the first one was Leobrin, being that he got essentially one-shotted because his hit points are relatively low, well, very low. They're like I think there were 10 hit points he had. So the giant was, if it hit with his axe, was doing 3d12 plus 6 damage, quite a lot. So it meant that the statistically things weren't looking good for Leobrin, and that was when it was revealed that this isn't quite what it seems, because he just disappeared when he was hit, and sort of a magenta sparks just erupted from where he was cut down. So that kind of gave the game away a little bit, but it was deliberate, because that was when I wanted the players to know what was going on exactly. And sure enough, the only other character who was killed off in this way was Seth. He wasn't one-shotted, however, he was under the water, further away from the rest of the party. I think Brucon tried to get to him to heal him, but then Brucon got knocked unconscious, and then it went that way. I think actually every single character was knocked down at least once to unconscious and then brought back. Really, the pivotal player, the MVP for that fight was, I would say, was Malar. Even though he was first to get knocked unconscious, he delivered the goods and kept everyone up, and that's what a life cleric, I guess, is all about. It's preserving the life and keeping everyone going in the fight. And this, although I wasn't pre-planning this, but it was thematically made sense that Malar was the one to finish off the fight and also the one who kept the players in it, because then after the fight, as soon as Malar hits with his quarterstaff for the killing blow, fade to white, and then it comes back to all the players are all together, they're all fine, still, but they're now in a much more, they're almost standing on clouds in this very angelic looking scenery, and before them is what turns out is Festir. Festir, who I had always envisaged that Festir was, in terms of my inspiration for Festir as a god, was basically that he would bear some semblance to Buddha, but also he'd also have the kind of Father Christmas, Santa Claus feel to him. Now, obviously, I don't want this to be too overt. It's like just to go for the whole beard, bowl full of jelly goes ho ho ho. Didn't want to go that far with it, but just to give a bit of that to it. He has a large sack, his haversack, full of stuff. Supposedly, this legendary item, he can pull anything he wants from it, supposedly. And being basically a very affable fellow, and I think that came across. And also, I think there's a tendency when you're DMing, if you're sort of trying to portray a deity, an ethereal figure of that kind of grandeur, to kind of go for this very deep and powerful voice of God. But actually, especially when you're going for a polytheistic pantheon of gods, you need to have variety. And Festir, being a very welcoming chap, I decided to go to my West Country roots, because I thought that's actually it's quite disarming to hear somebody when they start talking to you like that, but it's also quite homely, quite reassuring in those ways. So yeah, that was the accent I went for with him. Also, because he was a halfling as well, there was maybe a bit of stereotypical halfling hobbit kind of thing going on with that. But either way, I think that it maybe subverted expectations a little bit. Perhaps not the kind of character they were expecting to encounter after fighting the Frost Giant. And they somehow defeated the Frost Giant. I didn't think they were going to do that, but they did. So they were more prepared in Festir's eyes than he had originally anticipated, and in mine. But either way, this was a good indicator and kind of showed that perhaps his faith was put in the right group of people to basically aid the entirety of the many lands in the threat that is to come in the future. Now, this is the big kind of foreshadowing that I was talking about. It's basically giving a hint of the much larger main thrust of the plot, because up until this point, I feel the players probably have had slight sprinklings of larger things going on in the world, but they haven't really had anything concrete until this point. And in fact, now, even as we take our Christmas break and we're off for 2 weeks, it's the only kind of real overt reference to a larger plot line. And yeah, it seemed topical to do it at that point, and it also seemed very fitting to have a gift for the players afterwards, and not just for anyone, but for Malar Shade Creek, as he was not only he was the one who finished the fights, which I already kind of pre-planned that whoever kind of showed themselves the most in that fight would be the one to be given the gift. But it just made even more sense because Malar is a follower of Festir in himself. He is one of Festir's chosen. So then for him to meet his deity was just mind-blowing. And Dan, I think DK lapped up that bit of roleplay as well, just to have that moment as just I mean, it would be mind-blowing for anybody of a religious persuasion, or it's like meeting your hero but on a biblical level. So it was I think it was a lovely moment. Again, I think throughout the sessions so far, the roleplay really has, it started well and it's just got better as the sessions has gone on. As we've got to know these characters, I think they've kind of shown themselves even more, and I hope that also means that the players are enjoying themselves with the roleplay as well. I certainly am, so I really hope they are as well. I get the impression they are, but they will tell me if they're not, I'm sure. Yeah. Sorry, just getting a bit getting a bit dry in the throat there. So it's so that was kind of the last point of the session, and in fact for the year, was having Malar have his moment with his deity, rendered speechless by it, but being given Fortune's Folly, which is essentially a necklace with a sort of hourglass pendant attached to it. And this is a homebrew item I've made. It's really, really cool. And I'm going to say nothing more about it at this point because 1, spoilers, 2, spoilers, and 3, I'm going to let DK be the one to unwrap this when the time comes, because there'll be a time when he'll want to use it and he can reveal what it does, or at least one of the things that it does. All very exciting. Anyway, so looking ahead, basically we'll be picking up next year with the group continuing towards the banquet. I mean, we've been talking about this for a little while now, and they just got a bit sidetracked in that first in pursuing other leads, quite rightly so. So yeah, we'll be picking it up next year, and hopefully the rest of the journey will be a lot smoother to get to the banquet, because once they get there, they've got some stuff they guts to do. Kind of going to have a bit of a whodunit murder mystery feel, I guess, to it, in the fact that they're trying to find out if the tainted wine's there, who brought the tainted wine there, are they still there, who's behind all this. So there's very much a mystery and intrigue, which I hope we'll explore when the party arrive there. Also, there's going to be inevitably some schmoozing, some roleplay moments. And one thing in particular I'm looking forward to is some of the NPCs at the banquet going to be some very interesting characters that I think some of the party will very much warm to. So yeah, very much looking forward to that, and I hope you are as well. So that kind of wraps up session 23, but which I've called Fortune's Folly. It's now up on YouTube as well, so you can watch that in full. If you're already watching it on YouTube and you haven't seen that session yet, first of all, you probably should have before watching this, but otherwise, hey, I've given you the kind of the nuts and bolts. Enjoy it for yourself. It's really good fun. So I think last thing to do on today's stream then, as I said, is to kind of reflect a bit more on the entirety of Slice and Dice and the Meadowlands campaign so far, because it's been a little while now. I think, let me have a look on here. When we first started, it was we started, I want to say, it's got to be like I think at least 3 months ago now. I will find out the exact date, but there's a lot has happened in that time. It's been quite a roller coaster. But I thought it'd be good to share with you some of the kind of the highlights and lowlights for me personally. Just kind of for those of you who have ever thought about DMing and you've never done it before with a Dungeons and Dragons game, or perhaps you've never played Dungeons and Dragons before, or on the other hand, if you have been doing these things, or you're thinking about doing a live stream D&D campaign yourself, I thought it'd be good to kind of give a little bit of insight, a little bit of kind of share some of my own experiences, in the hopes that maybe it'll help you guys in the future if you're ever so inclined. So, not going to lie to you guys, it was a lot of work, and it still is quite a bit of work. And I think I'm fortunate because because my work that I do is essentially freelance. So I'm not in the office 9 to 5, 5 days a week, which means I've got a bit more time available. Well, I can move stuff around to basically fit in time to take care of this. So setting everything up takes quite a bit of time. Whether it's coming up with the logo and then changing the logo, as we have done recently to make the ampersand actually bearable. But then, of course, as soon as you make a change like that, you then have to do it across everything that you've got. So that's all of our social media, that's on Twitch, that's on YouTube, that's on our World Anvil page, on the merch stores, or everything. Like having to change up all of those things in one go. It's that in itself is work. Getting the channel set up. Then you're adding to that by then running your campaign and being the DM. Now, being a DM requires prep work in of itself. I am obviously a glutton for punishment because for the most part I have also made these adventures myself as well. And you know, there's reasons for that. I mean, for as much as anything else, not for an ego reason, but more for my own sort of fun. Oh, the legend 27069 has followed. Thank you for following. Very much appreciated. Comes with its own challenges. The reasons why I wanted to come up with my own adventures is firstly because then when you guys watch it, you're watching something you've never seen before. It's something new, something different. Secondly, because when I have run pre-written adventures before for D&D, and bearing in mind I've only been DMing for the best part of, I'd say the best part of a year, but that was once a month, so I'm relatively new to DMing anyway. But in my experience, I struggle when I run pre-written adventures because I kind of feel too tied down to the text. A lot of people don't have this problem, but I find that I want to read everything that's written in this block text that says, you know, tell the player, like, to give the description of a particular area. I feel I have to give everything that's written on there, and you know, not to get that wrong, because otherwise it might change other things. Whereas if it's my own setting, you have that freedom that you can then change things on the fly. I also feel kind of master of my own destiny with it because I've designed this world, therefore I know how it works. I think that's probably more of the issue with doing pre-written adventures for myself, is knowing how the mechanics work, because the pre-written official texts from Wizards of the Coast and so on are always written within a setting, and so although of course you can adapt it to your own setting, I haven't done that, and then I've kind of taken that setting and then changed it ever so slightly to make it mine. And there's kind of that not possession as such, but there is that kind of issue, that translation issue by going between the two. So starting with a blank canvas and having my own complete fresh setting, fresh storylines, gives me that creative freedom. I feel sort of creatively unchained, but also it does come with it extra work. So that as well, a lot of effort to put in for your stream. And then I think the main other thing in terms of setting up doing a D&D game, now I know that there are of course many ways that you could live stream D&D. You don't have to do it with everyone around the table. You can of course do it with webcams and so on, but and streaming from you can be over Skype or whatever, so that there's loads of you in different places all playing together at the same time via the internet. But my experiences with that is I don't think my technology is good enough to cope with all of those different sources. Secondly, I worry that with internet issues and things like that, and other sort of factors that are out of your control coming into play. But also, more important than either of those things is, as great as it is playing a game with other people, playing a cooperative game via Skype, via WhatsApp, via, you know, these video sources, there's nothing quite like the experience of having everyone together in the same room. You can vibe off of each other, you can laugh, you can cry, you kind of feel this group atmosphere. You feel there's kind of this magic that's created between people occupying the same space and towards the same goal, which I don't feel you get with webcams. It's not quite as authentic. I don't find you feel it quite as much. That's just my opinion. Of course, I'm welcome to be to have other people with contrary opinions to that. But for me, for this campaign, I feel like it's been really nice to have that kind of camaraderie build up with the players. You know, these people, some of them didn't know each other before starting this campaign, and now kind of feels like that they've forged some really good relationships, like some really good friendships there. And that's been really nice to see. I mean, it kind of feels rewarding for me setting this up to then see these relationships then kind of blossom off the fact that, you know, you've brought all these people together, and that's great. So that's it in terms of setting up. the D&D stream. So now highlights and lowlights of the campaign so far, and DMing a live stream campaign so far. So probably go with the lowlights first, just to kind of get the not so good stuff out of the way, and then end on a positive. So it can be quite stressful. I think for me personally, I think part of it was I put quite a bit of pressure on myself to deliver. Not only do I have the pressure of dealing with 6 players and making sure that they're all entertained at the same time, making sure that they all are aware of what's going on, that they're listening, that like I said, that they're having a good time, that they can follow the story, that the story itself is coherent. There's also making sure that I'm up to date with the rules and things. People do make mistakes, and I think when you've got enough to think about as it is, you're bound to make mistakes in terms of rules. And let's face it, in D&D there's a lot of rules, particularly for how all of the different spells work. Now I'm just not going to know how all the spells work, and that's okay. But I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to get those things right, and so I think at times I was finding it quite hard because I kept making sloppy mistakes. Whether it's not recording when we start the session and then having to start again, which only happened in the early days, hasn't happened for ages, touch wood. Or if it's just getting basic things in terms of the rules wrong, or perhaps not even explaining myself properly so that the players understand what I'm going on about. As with all relationships and anything that's to do with people, there's always going to be times where you don't agree, and I think that it's been a lesson to know how to deal with those situations. So how to deal with perhaps if one or more of the players is a bit upset with something that's happened in the game, to kind of explain kind of how it works, explain it from my side, but also be sympathetic and hear their side. What I found kind of difficult would be with sometimes, so like I said, because I've been putting pressure on myself to get things right, I feel that I've at times been a bit oversensitive with if I got something wrong, and the player or players make me very aware that I got it wrong. On the one hand, it's, I'm perfectly understanding and will take it on board that I got it wrong, because they're just trying to help. I think sometimes I think it's come across in the wrong way. So whether I've come across in the wrong way with what I'm saying, or have upset somebody within the group, I'm not sure that has happened, but I get the feeling that perhaps occasionally it does, and it could just be the characters in the game or the heat of the moment or whatever. But sometimes you have to kind of ride that balance as a DM, that sometimes you've got to make the tough decisions. You can't just please everyone all the time. I think that's hard for me because I generally am a bit of a people pleaser. That's why I do acting. I like to be liked, and so being a DM, sometimes you've got to be the bad guy and you've got to own that. And sometimes that's really worked, and other times I feel like I've got it slightly wrong, or perhaps that the players may have just misinterpreted it. In terms of the getting things wrong, what I found is you need to kind of leave the other issues that you're having in your life at the door, but that is a lot easier said than done. And I think for me, sometimes it has bled through, because I've had crisis kind of moments of feeling like I'm not getting anything right, everything's going wrong, and people keep telling me I'm doing things wrong, and then kind of push that aside and then come into doing a D&D session, and it feels like at times that was then happening again, that I was just being told I'm wrong all the time. And I know that's not true. I know that I wasn't wrong. I haven't been wrong all the time. But I think part of it is probably, it might be my own interpretation, bring my own baggage into it. I think partly also it can be the tone, and it could be the tone of the person who's saying that you're wrong. They might be saying it in an accusatory way. They might be, they might be a little bit irked because you've kind of trying to damage their character more than you should, or something like that. So I think you've got to be thick-skinned in that respect. You need to kind of take it on the chin when these things do happen, and understand that there's no personal vendetta. That the player in question, or the person in question, doesn't have a problem with you. They're just annoyed in the heat of the moment and being protective of their character and stuff. It's not personal. And I think sometimes throughout this, because of all those factors, I've maybe thought things were worse than they are in my head, and perhaps taken things to heart a bit, which I don't think I should have, but it has happened. So I think going forward, I'm going to try and make sure that doesn't happen as much. It's a mutual respect thing, I respect the players, and I need to make sure that they know that they are respected. But also, we need to assert that it's the same both ways. That they respect what I'm doing, and they're only trying to help. So when they correct me on things, it's because they are genuinely trying to help, to make sure that we're all playing the game correctly and fairly, so that we can all enjoy it. And maybe it's a trust thing as well, because as the DM, your players need to trust you, and you also need to trust your players. At the end of the day, it all comes down to communication. I think that when things have gone wrong for me, I don't think I've communicated properly. And I also think that when I have perhaps got a bit upset or worried after sessions or in sessions, it has again been due to a lack of communication and understanding. So hopefully that's something that I think you constantly need to work on, because people constantly, especially people who are close, have disagreements, have little tiffs and so on, and then you just come back together. Like, it happens to everyone. So those are the kind of, I think that's probably the main kind of lowlights, really. Aside from that, it's been all good. It's been a really fun journey. It's been probably one of the most rewarding things I've had was again, kind of going to this, I don't know if maybe I have quite a pessimistic view of myself, or of what of this and what we're doing, but kind of being told by Bart and by a couple of the other players as well. Actually, I can't remember all of you. I'm sorry who said it, but basically saying that this is the highlight of their week. That them sitting around a table and pretending to be magical creatures in a completely fantastical setting is the highlight of their week. And I know that I know that some of the guys have had shit days, shit weeks, or other things going on in their life that they're not enjoying, and so then to be told that this is kind of a light relief, it's a light in a darkness. It's one of the most rewarding things that I think it's one of the most rewarding feelings I've ever had. It really means a lot, really strikes a chord. So it kind of, although it feels like you're doing something that's really silly, it makes a difference to people. Similarly, highlights have got to be, after we were doing this for a couple of months, finally, it was only, I think, 3 months we've been doing it. So we've done it for more than that. It's been like 5 months now, but about 3 months in, session 14, and we had been made Twitch affiliates. That was amazing. Like, I can't believe that we have people that I otherwise would never met. Got genuine people from all over the world that that we've never met before, watching us and joining in with the conversation on the chat while we're playing this game around a table together. That was awesome. And then similarly, just kind of milestones from there, because as soon as the affiliate thing happened, I then started reaching out to other UK based D&D, well, actually D&D companies. I've now spoken to a couple of D&D groups as well. Most of them actually, most eye-opening was through Dragon Meet, which I'll get onto in a second. But anyway, reaching out to all these D&D based companies in the UK and just saying, you know, we've got this stream, we'd love to do a giveaway with you guys. And just the response has just been overwhelmingly positive. And it's just great to see that there's such a thriving community out there, but also that you're now a part of that community and kind of being welcomed into it with open arms. That's really meant a lot, and it's been really good. It's been great to see the amount of interaction when we've been doing these giveaways. Like I think the last one we did with Tabletop Crafter was we had over 300 entries, which is just mental. Like considering considering a few months ago, I don't think I've done in fact, up until that point, I have not done a single post about anything in my life, whether it's personally, whether it's to do with Slice and Dice or anything else, that has got such a response. It's crazy, but equally exciting, and it's great. And from that, we've then found people have then started tuning in and watching the stream as well, which is what you want, and that's so good. It's such a rewarding feeling. It's been great. And it's just it's then kind of built up from there. I was going to say snowball, but it's a bit slower than a snowball, but it's, you know, building up bit by bit. So much so that we now have our merch store with our own goodies, which I was wearing for the Monday stream, which is sad because you couldn't see it then, and you would be able to see it now. But hey ho, I will be wearing it next year, of course. And as a kind of thank you to the players, I got them all shirts as well. So that they have something to take away, but also, you know, they're giving up their free time as much as I am to come and play, and yes, they enjoy doing it, but even so, it does use up time and resource. You know, they've got to get here somehow. Yeah, it's just been overwhelmingly positive so far, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes next year. Speaking of which, one of the big things, one of the other bits of work that I've got to be doing for next year is at some point, it might be by our first stream. I don't want to guarantee it because I don't want to put too much pressure on myself over Christmas and New Year's, but we will be in the new year launching our stuff for subscribers. So at the moment, it's just kind of getting in place exactly what you would get as a subscriber. So then kind of make sure that it's worth you subscribing to the channel. At the moment, of course, you can follow us on Twitch, but subscriber stuff is going to be coming. So there'll be things such as discounts in the merch store. There'll be PDFs and other sort of docs that little bits of information or maps and tidbits that you otherwise wouldn't get. Just other things that kind of enhance the experience and make it more worthwhile. Make you kind of more part of the community, you know. So there's that's going to be coming in the new year, and in addition to that, we're also going to be having one-shots. One thing is it gives me a week off, which is nice, to kind of kick back and not have to DM for a week. Take some light relief from the main campaign to kind of try out other stuff. This is why I should go back to Dragon Meet. So Dragon Meet's the first ever con I've ever been to, and it was such a great experience. Seeing all of this massive community. I had no idea how large it was. All these tabletop role-playing companies and individuals and groups and just everything. So in addition, so with the one-shots, why that led me onto that is seeing like these new games that have been made and new systems and things like that. And we got chatting to a couple of them. And potentially we're going to be doing sort of team up one-shots, playing completely new games before they've been released, which is really exciting. Again, doing more giveaways and things like that. Yes, in addition to one-shots, also going to be looking into the possibility of subscriber streams as well. So ones specifically for you guys who've subscribed. That's perhaps quite a way off yet, but it will come eventually. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff to look forward to for next year. It's been a crazy journey so far, and long may it continue. It's been great fun. I wouldn't change it for anything. So if this has been helpful to you guys watching in any way, shape or form, please drop us a message or a comment. If you're not doing so already, follow us on social media. It's all at slice&d6. And I will see you in the new year. Until then, have happy holidays, whatever you're doing. A Merry New Year. And I'll see you. We'll be back on January the 6th. That's Monday, January the 6th, 6 p.m. GMT for session 24, our first session of 2020. And we've got some good stuff in store. Anyway, thank you very much for tuning in. Stay safe.